Fire and flow festivals have been an integral part of flow arts culture for nearly 2 decades, but in the past 5 years, they've also by and large fallen on some hard times. Why is that, and what does it mean for the first festival season in 2 years? That's the topic of today's video. Drex here from Drex Factor Poi, sharing with you the love of poi spinning and flow arts to benefit your body and brain, and today I'm diving into the triumph and tragedy of the flow festivals and how the culture around them has changed over the years. Before we dive in, I just want to give a quick shout out to the friends of the channel. Big thanks to Dark Monk, Flow Fests, Flow Toys, Juggling Calling, Pyroterra Light Toys, Spinballs, and Ultrapoi for helping to make the videos on this channel possible. You can learn more about all of these amazing businesses and what they're doing to support flow artists like yourself by checking out the links that I have down in the description of this video. And special thanks to non-business friends of the channel, Johnny Howard, Lain Mochinsky, and Pekha Pekkonen. Thank you so very much for your support for my work and my mission. So first up, I should probably clarify what I'm talking about when I say Flow or Fire Festival. Flow or Fire festivals are weekend-long events that cater specifically to flow and fire artists. Frequently, though not always, they involve camping out in rural locations for a weekend to be immersed in flow culture with workshops during the day and nighttime spin jams or fire circles for attendees. While there are scores of precedents for flow events, including circus or juggling festivals, Burning Man and satellite regional burns, conventions, and music festivals, the first true fire festival, Firedrums, was first held in 2004. And I think it's important to really recognize this moment for what it was in the history of flow arts and flow arts culture. Where before, fire spinning was seen as kind of a niche within circus, rave, or burner communities, the founding of an event designed specifically to cater to fire artists signaled both a critical mass of enthusiasts for them as well as a culture that was distinct enough to warrant its own unique events. The first Firedrums was pretty low-key, with most workshops being informal events that were staged on an ad hoc basis. In the following years, Firedrums formalized the structure of the event, inviting teachers from all over the world to teach daytime workshops, while inviting popular DJs to play for the fire circle at night. The formula was a massive success. One of the early attendees to Firedrums was a New England-based entrepreneur named Chad Bennett, who created his own spin on the format by founding Wildfire in Connecticut. For many years, Firedrums and Wildfire were kind of the yin and yang of fire festivals, with Firedrums cultivating a competitive, party-like atmosphere that attracted top-tier talent from across the world, and Wildfire retaining a much more casual atmosphere centered around education and shared experiences. And for several years, these two events were the only two in the United States that catered specifically to flow artists. But the founding of the festivals also coincided with a major social and cultural change that had an impact not just on the wider world, but also became a catalyst for the growth of the flow arts: the introduction of YouTube and social media. For most of the history of the fire arts, the only way to be exposed to it or learn the basics was to encounter another person who engaged in it. But social media changed all that by making information more accessible than ever. The sharing of video in particular lowered the barriers to entry for people to be exposed to and learn about fire spinning. And with that, interest in the flow arts exploded. Coming into the late 2000s, demand began to swell for these flow events, and both Firedrums and Wildfire began to sell out regularly. The Firedrums team worked to franchise its model under the umbrella of a company known first as Axis Mundi and later as Flow Arts Institute, or FAI. Realizing that many of their attendees were traveling great distances to take part in the event, they sought to add more events throughout the country to meet the demand and give people events closer to home to attend. Wildfire, on the other hand, added multiple events per year as overflow for the demand, peaking out at 4 events per year at the same venue. Even then, each individual event frequently sold out. People innovated on the model. Flowfests, a company based in Florida, hosts multiple flow events a year, but rather than having attendees camp out for them, they're all located in major cities. Not only does it make the events more accessible, but it also aids in the discovery of flow arts by placing them in highly visible spaces. And scores of independent events began to pop up all across the country, sometimes with multiple events in the same region or even just miles away from each other. Having been very active in the scene at the time, I can tell you that this was an incredibly exciting time. There was a point at which I was spending roughly half the year on the road touring and traveling between events. The peak of this explosive growth happened between 2013 and 2015. In 2013, Firedrums had its highest ever attendance at well over 1,000 people, and in 2015, there were more than 50 events hosted in the United States alone. For me, the moment that finally brought home not just how much the scene had grown, but how distinct and unique it had become, was when Wildfire added a third yearly event the week of Burning Man. Having come into the fire and flow arts from the burner community, it was incomprehensible to me that there could be enough people sitting out the burn to make the event worth hosting. And then, to my great shock, the event sold out. It was a huge wake-up call to me that flow culture had truly come into its own. But what made these events so popular? For attendees, there was this incredible feeling of belonging. Being a flow artist frequently meant that you felt like a bit of an outsider wherever you happened to live. Being able to connect with people that shared your interests and nurtured a feeling of belonging has been incredibly important to all subcultures. And for flow artists, that sense of belonging was super addictive. The festivals also fostered symbiotic relationships with many elements of the emerging culture. As tech poi culture emerged among math-curious sectors of the poi community, the festivals provided not only a place to interact with and compare notes with other innovators, but also an eager audience to teach all these new techniques to. For the many companies that sprung up to build props for the emerging scene, festivals also provided a venue to get direct and hands-on feedback from potential customers. To say nothing of the opportunity to develop more direct relationships with people who could inspire others in their home communities to want to pick up those same props. For many, the festivals also scratched an itch for travel. You could pop around the country checking out a variety of different cities, scenes, and see parts of the country in between. And on the business side of things, the Flow festivals presented an easy model to copy in a variety of different locations. It wasn't difficult for an attendee to one event to pick up enough information to host their own event closer to home. For a lot of people who felt bored or uncreative in their traditional jobs, the festivals represented an opportunity to be seen or to become part of something bigger. Organizers felt the pull of being part of a team, and instructors quickly became rock stars. People who'd never felt important, talented, or beautiful before suddenly had a stage to get on and feel good about themselves. But the explosive growth was not to last, and it became clear pretty quickly that a lot of what led to it was unsustainable. One of the first signs of this was that the smaller independent festivals began failing en masse. We went from 50 festivals in 2015 to only 20 in 2017. And what was even more troubling was that this didn't result in greater ticket sales at other events. During this period, I worked for Flame Festival near Atlanta, Georgia, and we saw the event grow by 15 to 20% per year for 3 years, and then the growth just stopped. The event plateaued at around 500 attendees and then declined slightly in the last year that I worked there. And it wasn't the only one. Wildfire events stopped selling out, and for the first time, the organizers had to cancel their fall event when ticket sales didn't reach the threshold necessary to host the event. The cancellation sent shockwaves through the New England community and resulted in the organizers scaling back the number of events that they hosted in future years. I talked to organizers at other events, and they told me similar stories. Attendance began to drop or plateau after 2015. Demand had dried up, and suddenly, even more established events were struggling to stay profitable and competitive. So what went wrong? First up, let's talk economics. One of my first clues that things were about to take a turn with the fire festivals was that I noticed wherever I'd go that I'd see the same 20 or 30 people at every single event you attended. And I'm not just talking about teachers either. I'm talking about attendees touring through the scene like they were deadheads following their favorite bands. Ticket sales were being inflated by devotees, so when these people were no longer able to afford to spend the time or money to travel this much, many festivals found that they were no longer profitable without them. Basically, the Flow festivals were a bubble, and that bubble burst. It also didn't help that many of the people starting new events had never run a business before. The logistics, marketing, and infrastructure requirements for doing so all turned out to be way more challenging than many festival hosts were prepared for. I know multiple people who took multi-thousand-dollar losses attempting to create their own events. In addition to people being inexperienced running businesses, many of the people staffing the events were untrained in their roles and ill-prepared to handle events that grew beyond a few hundred people. This meant high staff turnovers and events that were being run in a costly and inefficient manner. It also has to be said that the festivals encountered a lot of cultural problems too. One of the biggest points of contention has to be the compensation of instructors. When the model was originally created, the pool of instructors was largely undifferentiated, and nearly all of them could subsidize volunteering for a weekend. This meant that there was no incentive to give those instructors much compensation beyond a stipend to cover their travel, if that. But the rise in social media, in addition to making the discovery of the flow arts easier, also created incentive structures for people to get super specialized and virtuosic in their work. Many were constantly volunteering their time outside of the festivals and struggling to find income streams to support their work. So it just didn't really seem fair for the festivals to be selling tickets off their names and not compensating them for it. Many talented instructors ceased teaching at or attending the festivals at all. Remember how I said that a big part of what made these events popular in the first place was that they made people feel seen? That also became a problem over time too. Events were flooded with applications to teach, perform, DJ, or organize by a legion of people who only needed to be compensated by feeling special or being seen. It became real easy to stop booking costly high-level talent and populate workshop schedules with inexperienced teachers, galas with mediocre performers, and music lineups with amateur musicians. Not only did the quality of offerings at many events decline heavily, but the dynamic shifted such that it became the attendees' job to serve the instructors and performers, rather than the other way around. And 2013 was an inflection year for the flow arts world. It was the year that the European Juggling Convention was held in Toulouse, and Ultrapoi became a hit in the United States, catapulting the American circus craze of the 2010s. Many tech-poi enthusiasts switched over to juggling and began demanding events that had large indoor spaces to train in, which most festivals, being held in isolated rural venues, were unable to provide. It also has to be said, the culture around flow arts turned out to be a perfect storm for harmful behavior at these events too. You have a primary audience of people wanting to be seen and willing to be vulnerable to people that they've never met, plus an infrastructure that's built by an untrained labor force that's likely to be conflict avoidant. It's become clear over the years that assaults, abuse, and harassment were a lot more common at these events than we thought. And after all that, COVID-19 hit and resulted in all events being canceled for a solid 2 years. In addition to putting an enormous financial burden on even the events that were still able to hold on before the pandemic, it became clear through discourse online that there were two other enormous cultural problems that the festivals were facing. For one, many flow artists of color came forward to address the lack of representation in positions of visibility in the community, among them slots in teaching lineups and organizer positions. These pleas have frequently resulted in highly contentious, if not outright hostile pushback. And a lot of flow artists of all races and backgrounds have seen this as a signal that the festivals are not safe spaces. In addition, we discovered during the lockdown that there was an enormous contingent in the fire and flow communities that were anti-vaccination and/or anti-masking. And this has made a lot of people nervous about attending events with other people that might be a threat to their health. There is a lot of anxiety around harmful behavior in the flow arts community, and people factor that in when they think about whether or not they'll attend a weekend-long in-person event in a secluded locale. And all that said, there have been notable outliers that have had success, even as attendance has declined at other events. Playthink, Quasar, and Equilibrium have all leaned heavily into becoming as much music festivals as they are flow events, and they've had good attendance to show for it. And of course, it has to be said that things look a lot different outside of the United States, with fire festivals pulling in large stadium-like audiences in Eastern Europe, and retreats in exotic locales specializing in flow artists that have the travel bug. But as it stands right now, jumping into the 2022 season, the future is a little hazy when it comes to the flow and fire festivals. But is there a way to turn that trend around, to revitalize the festivals and bring people back to them? Honestly, I believe that there are some improvements that could be made, and I'll be covering them in a video next week. Did you get anything out of this video? Please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to keep the conversation going and to help my channel grow. This video would not be possible if not for the wonderful support of all of these amazing people right here. These are my Flow patrons over on Patreon, and they, along with the people listed down in the description, help to make this video and all the videos on my channel possible. Thank you one and all for your support. Do you like my videos? Do you like my flow sessions, vlogs, reviews, combos, and more? I'm on a mission to bring poi spinning and flow arts to the wider world and help people connect with their bodies and their brains. So help me do it. Head on over to patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi and sign up. You can do that either at the link down in the description or the card that just popped up if you're watching on YouTube. There you can get access to a whole host of rewards and help me along in my mission. Do check that out, please and thank you. Are you planning on attending a flow festival this year? Why or why not? Leave me a comment and let me know. In the meantime, I'll leave a link to a playlist of other videos I've done on flow festivals down in the description or up on screen if you're watching this video on YouTube. Make sure to get out and flow today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you with a new video on Wednesday. Peace.